Hello, my name is Vicente Quevedo with the Office of Neighborhood Coordination. Today we're here with our guest, Tyson Hummell, with the Alternative Dispute Resolution Department. Hello, Tyson. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Vicente. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. I was wondering if you could take a couple minutes here just to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Certainly. My name is Tyson Hummell. I am an assistant city attorney, and I am in charge of the ADR program for the city of Albuquerque. What we do is help people in conflict throughout the community find solutions to their own problems by helping them to be empowered to create their own solutions, to have healthy and productive conversations about the things that they find troubling, and to guide them through the conversation in the process of finding a compromise.
Excellent. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the programs that you guys offer through the ADR office.
Certainly. So we offer community mediation to all members of the community. It's free of charge. It's something that you can request directly through our office with a simple phone call or an email. It's a professionally mediated process where we create a safe space for people to have a conversation and solve problems like we were talking about before. We also offer that in the context of employee mediation for the city of Albuquerque employees, and we can also extend that to include members of the workforce generally in the Albuquerque community. We also offer, in addition to that, a land use facilitation program that helps to facilitate and make more efficient the process of development, economic development, and commercial development in our city by bringing community members together, community organizations together with developers and agents of developers in order to find solutions to community concerns surrounding development before they come up later in the development process.
You mentioned in reviewing the programs, mediation and facilitation. Maybe you could give us a little bit more detail about the difference between those two things.
Well, we get that question a lot, Vicente, and to be very honest with you, there isn't a huge difference when it comes down to the fundamental thrust of what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to resolve conflict, the perception of conflict, and the conflict that people are experiencing individually. Mm-hmm. So in mediation, it tends to be much more interpersonal. It's a smaller group context, and we're coming together in mediation to solve a known, quantifiable conflict that is pretty well defined. Mm-hmm. With facilitation, they tend to be larger groups of people. Mm-hmm. And what it is a strategic, a good way to think of it is a strategic planning session where people come together, and before we even begin finding a solution, we find a common definition of the things that are actually troubling us. So the facilitator will help to guide the participants through that process to get a very clear picture of exactly what they want to address, and then a mutually agreeable plan through finding what we call consensus. It's very helpful in large group settings, and the way that we define consensus is getting to a place where the participants can look at one another and say, I believe you've heard me, I believe I've heard you. Neither of us is getting exactly what we want, but I think and I believe I'm getting what I need. And so with those basic core needs met, people can find a sustainable solution that works for all parties and that they can live with. And it's created organically by the parties. It's not imposed on them by a court or by an administrative body. And so it tends to be more lasting and much more effective.
Okay. And in terms of that neutrality, I know that there's a term you use often, which is third-party neutral.
Correct.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
So a third-party neutral is sort of the term of art that describes the presence that I alluded to earlier, right? We touched on briefly. A third-party neutral is someone who doesn't actually decide who's telling the truth, who's wrong, or who's right. A third-party neutral doesn't impose their own solutions upon the parties, no matter how obvious those solutions may appear at times. Rather, a third-party neutral looks with a completely unbiased view at what the participants are experiencing and help them through the process of communicating that to the other and to guide the conversation in positive and productive ways to help them find a solution to the things that they've articulated. And it's a delicate process. It's not heavy-handed. It's something that is very low stress for the participants to go through. It's something that's sort of nurturing in the relationship.
Interesting. And I assume that you'd have to have a pretty specialized team of folks engaging in this work. Is that correct?
Indeed, we do. We have an excellent staff of contract mediators and facilitators. And the reason why we use contract mediators and facilitators as part of our service offering is because of that neutrality. The last thing we want to do is have people feel as though the city or a government entity is meddling in their lives. What we'd like to do is provide them that safety of neutrality and that feeling of safety that they would get from someone who has no dog in the race.
Interesting. So now that you've given us some background on how the program works, maybe you could give us some examples of how or when somebody might use the city's free mediation or facilitation services, some examples of that.
Well, Vicente, that's one of my favorite parts about the program. I invite people in all varieties of interpersonal, group conflict, in both their private lives and in the commercial sector as well. We do things with employees, landlord, tenant, nuisance issues in the community. Ultimately, our goal is to have people experience a community and a neighborhood where they feel safe, secure, well supported, and are able to enjoy the comfort of their communities and their neighborhoods without the underlying tension of conflict. And so the best way for them to do that is to work through it at the earliest possible stages. We like people to give us a call, even if the matter seems trivial or it's a little embarrassing even to admit that there's something going on. And it's a voluntary process, and it's very surprising to see how many people are willing to come and sit down and just have a conversation. It's really a positive thing.
And I've seen lots of success stories through the work that we've done together in collaboration with the Office of Neighborhood Coordination. Could you give me one brief example of a success story?
Absolutely, and this is something that would actually be very relevant to the Office of Neighborhood Coordination. We had a complaint from a group of community members in a neighborhood. It was in the southeast quadrant of the city, and there was an organization there doing very good work. Due to confidentiality, I'm not going to name it explicitly, but it is a nonprofit who served homeless communities, and a lot of the patrons who relied on those services for their daily needs were experiencing various health and mental health issues, sometimes addiction issues, and the community members were concerned because after mealtime or other common gathering times, the patrons would sort of filter into the surrounding neighborhood, and people were concerned of the nuisance it was causing. There was safety, health, and other issues that were very concerning to them. The delicacy of the dance in that situation was that nobody was upset with the work that the organization was doing. In fact, they felt very positive and very supportive of the fact that these people were receiving help, but they just needed it to happen in a way that could balance the needs of the neighborhood with the needs of the the other community members who needed those services.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually were able to find a compromise. It involved changes to the infrastructure at the facility. It involved compromises on behalf of the neighbors. It involved additional staffing.
Mm-hmm.
And what it did was it created, like we were touched on just now, a balance of interest.
Sounds interesting. Well, thank you for that information. What's the phone number for somebody to call to get a hold of your office in the short time we have left here?
768-4712.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, Tyson. I think this information is going to be very helpful to community members throughout Albuquerque and neighborhood associations alike.
Thank you, Vicente. Appreciate it.